Cool. All right. Hello, Sandra. How are you going today?
I'm fine, thanks. It's lovely to see you, Natasha.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for your time for, I suppose, engaging in a conversation about something really, really important, which is Article 16. And obviously, we'll talk a little bit about what that means, who you are, what you do, but also really want to hear your thoughts about the issues that Article 16 obviously is intended to protect us from. So I suppose just to begin, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with Zonta. What is Zonta?
Well, Zonta is an international women's empowerment organisation, and we have clubs in 63 countries around the world. We've got almost 30,000 members, and our mission is really to improve the lives of women and girls. And we're quite deliberate in that. We've been doing it for 100 years, and last year we celebrated our centenary in 2019. And the reason for that is that when you improve the lives of women and girls, you improve the lives of that family, but you also improve the lives of the community. And Zonta's been very strong about this. And part of the work we do is through service, and quite a lot of the work is through advocacy. And we advocate on behalf of women and girls around the world, and even in our own community here in Western Australia. So I am the governor of District 23. There are 32 districts around the world in Zonta. And District 23 covers Western Australia, South Australia, Northern Territory, Victoria and Tasmania. And in COVID, I'm just using Zoom to talk to people.
We definitely have to adapt, don't we? But that's amazing. That's a big district you've got there, and Zonta sounds like a fantastic organisation. Obviously, I myself am part of Zonta, so I'm very proud to have you on board for this project and hear more about the work Zonta does, of course. So I suppose in terms of your role as a governor, what are you what are your priorities, or what are you interested in making sure that people know about Zonta and the work that you guys do?
Yes, well, we try to get the word out to people, but I think advocacy is one of our points of difference with other service organisations. Now, men and women, anybody can really join Zonta if they're interested in improving the lives of women. And because we have advocacy, we're sort of trying to change the opinions of people within the community, but we're also trying to change some laws within our states. So they could be state laws here, or they could be federal laws. Now, clubs are able to advocate on issues like of child marriage within their own state and have some laws changed. Or as a district, we could get together, and as long as our members agree, then we could advocate to the federal government. Sometimes we actually advocate from our 3 districts in Australia, and we will all get together and put our names to various reports that are going to government to try and get some changes. And in the area of child marriage, I think it is to make people aware of the impact that this really has on young women and how it really affects the society in which we live. And I think some people think that this is only happening in developing countries, but of course it happens here as well. And we're cutting out the potential of these young women by not giving them an education. So this, in my biennium, I have an advocacy chair. She lives in Launceston. She's very good at advocating, and this is her 2nd biennium of doing it with the other districts. But now we have set up in each area, I'm having an advocacy person, and then we're trying to get an advocacy person from each club, because we're not a political organisation in any way, and sometimes our members think that if we advocate to politicians and write letters, we're being political, but we are not being political. We are advocating on behalf of women and girls, and it doesn't matter who's in power or opposition. We need them to know about this to bring about the changes that we want. So I'm really keen on the advocacy part of Zonta.
That's fantastic. Well, obviously we're talking about Article 16, and you've touched on some of that sort of, I suppose, contemporary world issue, which is really child brides being a very, very big topical problem. And I've obviously had the pleasure of reading through some of the work that Zonta has put together, and the numbers are astounding. How many women have been affected, how many children have been affected by this issue. What do you think is the role of Zonta internationally, I suppose, in terms of child brides or these sorts of issues, and how do you think Zonta can actually uphold Article 16?
Well, I think because we have participatory status at the UN, we do have a voice there, and we can add our voice to all the other women's organisations. We don't go out on the ground and, you know, spread our word in certain countries. We do that with the UN and UN organisations and UN women. And we try to get work happening there. For instance, we've been doing some work, I think I put down here, in Zambia. And we started off last biennium looking at child marriage, because we only went into making this a major project of Zonta after our convention in 2018 in Yokohama. And so we chose 12 countries we'd sort of be working on. And then we're expanding it out now in the next biennium. But Zambia was one of those 12 countries where we're operating at the moment. And for young people under 15, 46% of the population are under 15. And so you've got a lot of young women and men there. Now, if you are not giving these young women the opportunity to go to school and to develop and not be just childbearing at that young age, it really holds their society back, and the economic benefit is not being seen in those countries if you don't do this. So that's why we're doing that sort of work.
That's fantastic. I think it's very easy to forget that this issue is so prevalent, and even in Australia today, I feel like the conversation's still happening because it does actually occur in our community here in WA as well. Obviously not on that large scale, I understand. What do you think is the role of grassroots work, not just Zonta, just everybody else that's in the sector, working with young women, working on empowerment and development, such as Edmund Rice Center? What do you think is our role in making sure that these sorts of issues don't actually become a common practice?
I think it's making people aware, and making young women aware that they do not have to actually get married at this time. I know it can be difficult for them in their families, but even making their mothers and fathers aware that this is not really acceptable within our country, and that their child will have a better life and that family will end up with great benefits if they don't go into this forced marriage. And we know that this happens in our communities, but the other thing we can do is advocating and making aware that different agencies within our country are aware of this. And so sometimes when young women are being taken out of our country to be married under force in another country and then brought back, that there are ways for those agencies to pick up that this might be happening. Because some young girls, that does happen to them, and we do know those sorts of stories. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very difficult conversation, I imagine, in communities and obviously with authorities being very aware of it. I suppose you've touched on this, and this is a very important thing, the benefit of women being involved, girls being involved in education and employment, and not just being sort of at home, child rearing. The benefit for the whole community and international community is definitely there. Is there something that you would probably leave our listeners and our viewers with that sort of says, this is what you should know about this issue, and this is how you can engage in that conversation locally?
Well, I just think, you know, women's rights are human rights. And this is a human right to be able to, you know, fulfill your life and have an education and have a choice. And some, you know, gender equity is a big issue for Zonta. And in the Sustainable Development Goals, number 5 is what Zonta is really pushing about gender equity. And we really do need these people to, you know, go to their full development. That's what makes great countries. And that's what makes the wealth. So, yeah, Zonta is doing the best that we can, and we have to get the word out there, and advocating within our 63 countries and beyond is what we want to do.
Definitely. And obviously being part of this, you're definitely doing a little bit, and hopefully people who do see this and sort of understand the topic a little bit more will keep researching and engaging in those conversations. You mentioned forced marriage just briefly there.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I know it's such an issue around the world. Why do you think it's such a big issue, and why do you think it's such a bad thing for us all?
Well, I think it's cultural, and that can be a difficult conversation to have. And unfortunately, you know, there's quite coercive control. We know that in domestic violence situations where families can actually feel shamed if they want to marry off their daughter to somebody. And it is a big issue because people end up being trafficked in this way, trafficked from one country to another to marry. So, yeah, I think, you know, early marriage and forced marriage are pretty much connected. In Zonta, we have some examples of the strategies that we're using in some countries. For instance, we're engaging adolescent girls through initiatives, including life skills, their health information and economic empowerment and social protection, improving the education access and trying to retain them at school, providing out-of-school girls with alternative learning opportunities. So they might be at school, but to maybe set up some opportunities in the evening or wherever they might actually be in the fields. Strengthening health, education, child protection and social protection systems, and fostering community dialogue and creating public service announcements to better inform the dangers of child marriage and the benefits of supporting and investing in young girls. So they're some of the strategies that we're using in those countries to bring about some change.
That's fantastic. That's a big commitment, lots of work, but definitely worthwhile. Obviously, we mentioned domestic violence. One of the biggest things that Zonta obviously looks at and tries to advocate against, and obviously teaching young girls and women generally what it is and how, I suppose, how to seek help. One of the things I read about forced marriage and I suppose early marriage is that those people that are in these sorts of situations, often they're quite young and they are quite vulnerable and they do end up in violence type situations. The rollover effects obviously on children and the family as well as the community is horrendous. You obviously said advocacy plays a very, very big role in this, and a very, very important conversation for us to have is at the grassroots level in our communities here is to just keep talking about women's rights. Is there anything else we can talk about or do here in Perth that actually continues that conversation and helps with the advocacy against these issues?
I think one of the good things that we can do is to work with other organisations, not just think, well, we have to do it by ourselves, but work with the other service organisations, work with your organisation, all organisations together. That gives us the power. And one of our very strong programs in Zonta has been Zonta Says No to Violence. And in different communities, and certainly in my district, that a lot of the clubs actually work with, you know, their white ribbon community now, with the police force. We've set up refuges here in Perth. We've got the Zonta House Refuge, which started as now stands alone. So that you will see if you go onto any Zonta website that around the world that is a very strong issue. And one thing we'll be working towards with the other governors, I think, here in Australia, is trying to make coercive control illegal. Because I think many people need to be made aware that domestic violence isn't just a bruised eye, that coercive control is a lot stronger and, yeah, really disempowers a lot of women. But we do have support with our government here, I think, in Western Australia and Department of Communities. But the more we can talk about it, we can get out there and support different programs and work together. I think that's the best way to go.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic, fantastic way to actually wrap it all up. But before we do, I thought I might ask you a question which is quite contentious at the moment. And someone actually asked me this morning, and I thought I might bring it up and see what you think. Obviously, we're talking about Article 16, and it's the right to marriage and to found a family. I understood it, obviously being a woman, I understood it as very much a female right. It's a human right, as you said, but to be a woman, that should be my right to choose or not to have a family. In the context at the moment, we're obviously talking about the LGBTQI community as well. Do you think there's a place for this article to actually be brought up in those conversations as well?
Yes, well, I mean, it's talking about marriage, and it doesn't say marriage between whom, I don't think. And I think it's about a human right, and it's about including everybody in that right, and they should be talking about it as well. And I think it's another area in family violence that we sometimes don't think that in those sorts of relationships that there is often family violence as well. So marriage is between whoever wants to get married, as far as we're concerned. And certainly Zonta, you know, we take no political role, no religious role, no racist roles in any particular way. We're open to everybody, and that's what we're about, people's human rights. So yeah, well, I think they have every right to talk about it as well. And I think it does include them.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. True. We often forget in these conversations that men obviously are part of, you know, should be part of the conversation in terms of domestic violence and forced marriage, not just women, and it shouldn't be just an issue that women are concerned about or that affect women as well, which is very true. But of course, our LGBTQI community, same thing. Often forget that, and we go, oh, you know, marriage is between men and a woman. But actually, no, this conversation is definitely much wider. And so Article 16, you're right, it doesn't seem to specify who, what, where. It just means that it's a willing relationship, and there's consent, which is what we're talking about, having rights to choose. So that's fantastic. Well, look, Sandra, I have had such a fun time actually talking to you and learning a little bit more about Zonta. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we say goodbye to you?
No, just that if there are people interested in the sort of work we do, we're always willing to listen to other people, and we're willing to engage with them at Zonta. And yeah, we're about service and advocacy. And as I said, men can join as well. And one of my fellow governors around the world is a male. And that's fantastic, because I think we have to, if we're to get gender equity, men have to be involved in that conversation, and they have to help us get there, actually.
Absolutely, I agree. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. And yeah, I guess we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.